Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hipfire Podcast. This is the 29th episode, and today we are going to be recapping a bit of the first week of the CDL. So, the CDL is back. We had a really exciting first weekend of matches. There were some upsets, which were unexpected because it started out very top heavy, but we did get the upsets. We had some game fives, we had some crazy clutches, and I believe in the last stream we had like peak viewership at 120,000. So, it's a fun time to be a COD fan for sure. And so for us, we're going to kind of run you down who stood out to us and what like teams looked good to us, and just do an overall breakdown and less so of a like individual team basis. So to start, I thought we kind of give you guys our team of the week. So these are four players that really stood out to us and seemed to be frying basically almost every map. So for that, we have Abizi, Kenny, Kleenex, and Hook. So yes, which player do you want to start with here?
Player I want to start with is the guy that I think everyone will have in their minds right now, which is Abizi. Obviously, he had a very impressive performance this past weekend. Most notably, they ended up taking down Optic Gaming, or Optic Chicago. I keep saying Optic Gaming. Optic Chicago in their most previous matchup this past Sunday, which is a really key matchup because based on the way that we understand these round robin matches to go, is that they'll play each team in the group once. So winning this matchup could very well mean that they end up getting that first seed in that bye when it comes to the major later on in the season. So really key matchup for them. And Abizi was a big part of that. I mean, he had individually a lot of very important plays. I mean, most notably, people will remember in the Moscow hardpoint his really key three-piece on P4 by the bus, where he ended up killing the biggest kill being Dashy and helping secure phase both the hardpoint, and they were able to lock down the spawns because they knew they were going to spawn out P2. So, like individual plays like that are what made him stand out. Plus, in S&D, I mean, we talked about it last year, how Abizi in S&D is such a key player for FaZe, although he may not have the stats, because he's such an aggressive player on the map. He's either getting first blooded or he's getting the first blood. And we saw in this Optic series, he was getting the first blood almost every round. And we saw from some stats, I think round 11 stats was talking about how last year that, when you get a first blood that's untraded, you're going to win the round 70% of the time. And so statistically, FaZe was going to win almost every round that they were in because Abizi was consistently getting first blood after first blood after first blood and stopping any progress that Optic had in S&D. And he was also making, like we mentioned, big plays in the hard point. And that's why he's one of our players for Team of the Week. I mean, we've constantly sung his praises and talked about how, in many ways, he is the best player on this FaZe team. And arguably the best player in the CDL, given the role that he has to play night in, night out as that entry sub player. So it's only right we show him some love. I mean, just some stats. I mean, that hard point, he had a 1.27. I mean, I think he actually went negative on the series, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he dropped a 0.96, which again shows you KD doesn't mean everything. He had a 0.96 in the series, but if you were to ask anyone who was the MVP, everyone would say him because of how he played. So just shout out to him.
Yeah, that takes us to our next player. I mean, one more thing on Abizi. That three piece smoked Dashy, smoked him. um, but yeah, so there's our next person, which is Kenny. So for me, I've always been a Kenny fan since World War II, when I like fully sank my teeth into competitive Call of Duty, and I started liking TK right from the start. And Kenny was frying; it was amazing. And then he hadn't really returned to form since then. I mean, he had a up and down year in Black Ops 4 where he didn't start the greatest, and then he ended really, really well and was very clutch. But it wasn't the same kind of Kenny. He was a different role, and he was breaking like smart plays and clutches, but it wasn't like the super slaying Kenny, And then last year, and the whole team just didn't perform well enough. It wasn't just him, but an individual performance. I wanted to see more from him this year, and he's off to a great start. And he looked fantastic in all game modes that he played in, and the whole team really looked pretty impressive. But Kenny stood out to me, and it's nice to see because it's like you want to think about World War II Kenny being back, and it's a good sight for any of you Heart of Thieves fans, and also like it's a it's a big confidence boosting thing for Kenny because people have been not like trash talking Hundred Thieves, but they've been let down by Optic last year when now they're the Thieves, where it's like, can we really expect TJ or Kenny to hit that form that they used to? or are they already kind of past their prime and we should be looking towards like Empire and FaZe to be the best teams? I think for them, like they know how talented they are, and to start out the way they did is a really good start, and they know they can be the best team. And seeing Kenny play that well is a really good sign and indication that they can continue to do this and continue to slay. Because on paper, that's a really, really slay heavy team. That also should be really good in Surge. Like on paper, they should have any weaknesses. It's just, given the past couple of years and the form they've been in, you can understand why people were, hesitant to call them, top two, top three team in the game. But, they have some big matches coming up. I think, not, I don't think next week, I think the last week they play the Empire, right? So that'll be a big test for them because, they can look good against these teams all they want, but until they beat the likes of the Empire, Optic or FaZe, we can't really cement them as a top four, top three team yet. But seeing Kenny play that well, it's coming. That takes us to our next player, which is Kleenex. So yes, why is Kleenex on there?
Yeah, Kleenex, as a Toronto Ultra fan, I was really curious to see how they're going to play, and we'll talk about the Ultra in general later on. But Kleenex really stood out to me in this series and the way he played. Again, this is his sophomore season in many ways, and even though we call it sophomore season, he really only played a couple events last year. Obviously, one of those being champs, but he didn't get a lot of time in the game, so this was really his first full season competing as a pro. And so it was going to be really interesting to see how he was going to perform. And safe to say that he is going to be disgusting. The way he played in the series as the entry sub was fantastic. I mean, you look at the hard points. He was constantly putting up pressure in the face of the Florida Mutineers at all the times. Spawn trapping them, alleviating the pressure on guys like Zinni. He didn't have to constantly run into the subs. Florida, or not nearly as much, because Kleenex and Bance and Cammy on Garrison, they were pushing out those lanes for, the main AR of Zin, and it made life on him so much easier. I mean, it's just the pressure he's able to apply on the other teams and alleviate for his own team. It, can't be understated. I mean, he had a 1.13 overall KD, a 1.35 in the hard points, both Crossroads and Garrison, which are, to be fair, more sub-dominant maps. He thrived in, and I think that's going to be the key for the Ultra. As I talk about their hardpoint later, is that having sub-dominant map and having a guy like Kleenex just fits perfectly because of what he's able to do, the spots he can get himself in, and the pressure he can apply on the Mutineers. And he did it. He didn't have the greatest S&D at a 7 and 8, so it's not horrible. And then the control 30 and 34 again. It's going to be hard for an entry sub to always go positive, as we talked about with the BZ. But again, it was the pressure, and I'm going to say this again, pressure, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the pressure he was able to apply on the map and the pace he was playing at really helped set the Ultra up for success in this series, particularly in the hard point, which was a game that they struggled in all of last year, and that's why he has to be a part of Team of the Week.
Yeah, for sure. Like he was nasty. Especially not on like Garrison hardpoint. He looked so good on that map. But yeah, that takes us to our last player, Hook. Hook the nuke. He is disgusting at this game. I know they lost to Minnesota, and it's like a bit of a blemish for New York. But I mean, Hook had a 1.39 overall KD, led out all players in 1.39, and you can't not put him there, even though they went 1-1. He looks really good, and I think it was Nameless or somebody, one of the casters maybe, who said like Hook might look like the best player in the game right now. It's very, very early to say that, but oh my god, did he fry! It wasn't just like the frying, like his gun skill either. It was movement. It was the whole thing put together. He looked fantastic. This one particular moment on a checkmate. I don't remember if it was a checkmate control or hardpoint. I can't remember right now, but it was a respawn checkmate, and he was, playing steps and getting shot from yellow crate, and he picked up like 2 kills, hopped around the staircase, did a little weird movement thing, and stayed alive. And he's just like, it looked like 2 people just couldn't kill him. Like, you just could not kill Hook. And may have even referenced AW Hook and how AW Hook was like unkillable. And maybe said like, I know it's been a lot of years, but right, man, like you just can't kill this guy. So if that kind of Hook is back, Dallas, everyone knows how talented they are with even the shots he playing out of his mind as well. And they got to tighten up their searches. But I mean, Hook individually looked fantastic. So I don't think, losing a series is going to take away from that. I think you're still really excited if you're an Empire fan because, if he's looking like your best player and he's still up shots on the team, that's a really good sign. You guys are going to be very good for basically the whole year. And it's for Hook, it's really good for him because, when he came back to COD after Halo, it was rough at first. Like he didn't have the best placements. He didn't do that well individually. And when he started to like step it up individually in Black Ops 4, people kept saying he didn't have enough help. And then he gets traded to Splice, where there's supposed to be help there, and it still doesn't work out. And then obviously last year they win, and it's incredible. Yet Shotzi outshines him. So for this year, for him, if he keeps up this kind of performance, I think it'll be great for his legacy and him as a player, and kind of remind us of how good Hook really is. I think Maven also said that before. He was, Shotzi is so talented, you forget how talented everyone else also was in that team and how good individually each one of those players are. So it was great to see Hook frying like that, and I hope to see more of it too. But with that, that wraps up our team of the week. So yeah, if you guys noticed, no man AR on this team of the week, which is strange because it's supposed to be an AR heavy game, yet here we are. But that being said, uh, I do think that early days, we might see some things like this. But I do expect ARs just to still be very good and have really good stats. It's just like Hook, Simp, Kleenex, like some of these sub players had a really good weekend, so it was cool to see. Despite the XM4 ripping everyone on off headies and being very very good gun, subs could still thrive. So with that, we're gonna now head into a next segment, which we're gonna kind of highlight the teams that impressed us and stood out to us. So the first team you want to highlight, well, we have to do it. There are little home favorites here, but is the Ultra. And I know you want to talk about the Ultra a little bit, so why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it a little bit already with reference to clinics and their hard points. But again, coming into the season, we talked about how they were going to need to be more consistent in respawn in order to beat a lot of these top teams in these series. And lo and behold, their hard point thus far, if I'm not mistaken, they haven't dropped one, including the Kickoff Classic, although that was a preseason matchup. Uh, they've looked very strong in hardpoints thus far. They've looked very composed. They've looked really good on respawn in particular. Again, the pressure that guys like Kleenex are able to put on the map, um, as I said, really alleviate the pressure on guys like Zin. Cammy was doing very well at the flex position, so you didn't have to really worry about that whatsoever. Bance, although his stats in the S&D and control weren't great, he had a 1.1 on the hard point, so he was holding his own for the most part as well. Um, so like, in general, like as a team, they looked very strong. I mean, the damage per game. I mean, Kleenex had 524, Cammy 516. Bance and Methods didn't have nearly as much, which shows that they didn't need to do as much on the map, which I mean is always a good sign because it shows that Cam and Kleenex are doing their jobs. So again, that's a really big key thing for them. With regards to the S&D, I mean, they took it 6-4 in Miami. And again, if their S&D looks strong and their hard point looks as good as they are, they're going to win majority of the series that they play. Again, shout out to Zinni. I know we've harped on his S&D in the past, but he dropped 11 kills in this one. It looks very strong. He won, half of his opening duels, which is really important. Obviously, as I said, these are all from Breaking Point UG, so check those guys out if you already don't know them. And again, the control. This was the biggest concern for me going into this specific matchup, considering their control against Minnesota looked horrendous, even though it was preseason. It did not look very good. This one was a bit closer. It felt like they sort of let Florida win this one. This one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was also Garrison control, and it felt like the Ultra, had opportunities to win this specific map, but let it go at the last second. Which is a bit unfortunate. But again, they go back to the crossroads and win it. And this matchup was really important for them, just considering Florida's another top team in the group. That meant they expect to be a part of that top three in the group that make it to winners. So them winning this matchup is huge because if they're able to take care of business with regards to Paris and LAG, and at least hold their own against Optic and FaZe, they can expect to place third in their group, which will effectively help them make the winners bracket, which is a pretty good spot to be in the first major.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you lose the first game and then next week you get to play Optic and then FaZe, if you start out 0-3, you might already chalk the first stage. So definitely important to come out with a win because Optic and FaZe definitely look like definitely are favored. But coming out winning the first one, if you lose the next two, you're just still like, oh, we're okay. We can rebound and beat the next two teams and still make it third, like Yas mentioned. So yeah, definitely a huge win for them. And I wouldn't put it past an upset next weekend. Like they looked really good in Respawn, and Optic didn't look great in S&D as we know. So there's room there for an upset for sure. But yeah, definitely got to tighten up the control. You're right about that. But moving on, we have the Rocker as our next team. So they did lose their first series, and what's interesting about what happened in the first series was that Priesta just couldn't keep up. Like he had a really poor series from him individually. I think he might have done okay in the search, but in respawn he wasn't keeping up with the 100 Thieves and wasn't keeping up with like Kenny and TJ. But he actually stepped up a lot against the Empire, which is surprising to me because I would have thought it'd be harder to play as a sub against Shotzi and Hook than it would be against Kenny and TJ. But Priest had a much better series individually, and then also the S&Ds looked really clean. And this is something we knew the Rocker was good. We're going to be good at before the season started. Like preseason, even when we were teasing apart the Ultra and Rocker, pre-show matchup, kickoff matchup, we said like the Rocker are really good at S&D. We expect them to beat the Ultra in that game mode, and we think like Major Maniac is a very good S&D player. Tash never loses his ones. Lamar's had like a million clutches in World War II. Last time it was a 4v4 game. We had a really strong feeling about these guys in S&D, and they did not disappoint. Obviously, they haven't dropped the S&D map yet, and they beat the defending world champs twice in S&D and looked really, really strong doing it. And it's interesting because they we're gonna always say for this team that they have to get better at respawns. Like that's gonna be the catch-all thing the whole year because I don't expect their S&D to decline at all. It's probably gonna be fine the whole year. But it's not a terrible respawn team on paper. The question that I had and other people had was like, are they fast enough? Is their sub pressure going to be enough when you play the likes of the Empire, for example? And so far, it doesn't really seem that it's quite fast enough because they did lose both hardpoints. But it can get there. Like I think it's attach and Priesta as their subs. That's not like a bad thing. Like they definitely can keep up, and they can improve in hardpoint. And I do think that the Rocker are a scary team especially because they could beat you in S&D, and it's already two game modes out of the way. So yeah, very good showing from them. Because even like the Hunter Thief series, like they got stomped in the respawns, but like I don't know, I have a good feeling about them. I have a feeling like they're they can step it up and then hard points and get better respawns. I don't know if maybe you might disagree with me Yas, but I feel like it might be easier for teams like the Rocker to improve in hardpoint than it would be a team that's like terrible at like Paris, for example, to improve in S&D. Because I feel like S&D is
Um,
more like instinct based, and like
I do agree.
I don't know. You can go ahead.
I agree with that. I think there is something to say that um, getting better at a hard point because you grinded so much. You can learn people's setups over time. Um, Definitely can improve over time. I think that's definitely a good point. I mean, you look at even the Ultra going back to last year, who was a strong S&D team that over time showed improvements in hardpoint, and that's what helped them later on in the season.
That's a
Whereas
good point.
showing improvements in S&D, it can be difficult because I mean, you have the initial setups and everything in your pushes and your strats, but when it comes down to it in the middle of the round where you have to make those in-game adjustments, or there's certain situations where you play off instinct. I mean, that really comes down to the player. And like you mentioned, a team like Minnesota, rather, with guys like Attach and Priest and Lamar, and even Major, who are all incredibly talented S&D players, as you've witnessed, they are capable of winning those situations based off their incredible instincts. And I don't think you can just teach those in a day. So for all those other teams, they're going to struggle with. So I agree with that sentiment for sure.
Yeah, and like also one more thing on Major, I just like it always reminds me of when I used to watch Teddy Rex's stream, and like last year when they were streaming Black Ops 4 in the off season, they're playing like 3v3s. No, it was during World War II, or not World War II, Modern Warfare. But they're playing 3v3s, and it was like Major Maniac, Teddy, and then I forget the third, but the way that like Major Maniac would just like read what other teams were doing in 3v3 was incredible. Like just the smartest reads, and like he had Teddy Rex gassing you up the whole map as he always does. The ultimate gas man. But watching him like just completely decompose a team like over the course of like 10 or 8 rounds or whatever it is, like it's really impressive to watch. So definitely look out for them to be a consistent dominant force in S&D. But moving on from the Rocker, I know Yas has some stuff to talk about with the New York. subliners.
So New York, they played one match this weekend. Am I mistaken with that, or am I completely faded?
They lost to some. They lost to the
They
100
lost 100
Thieves.
Thieves. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That was their one match. Okay,
Yep.
I wasn't sure if they played another match besides that, but yeah. So they played one match with their new lineup. Obviously, going back to the preseason matchup against Dallas, they got 3-0'd pretty handedly, and that was shortly after Zuma's announcement. So we couldn't really expect much from them. Now with the regular season matchup that has stakes in the line, we got to see them play. And although they got 3-0'd, if anyone watched the series, you could instantly tell that this wasn't like a beat down 3-0. This wasn't a quick 3-0. This was a hard fought win 3-0 that New York, honestly, in every single one of the maps could have and should have won. Looking back at the hard point, I mean, they had, uh, uh, you know, they had multiple great pushes and holds on certain hills. If you actually want to check it out, I hold shift on his Twitch stream. He has a series called The Playbook where he breaks down series. And one of the series he broke down was 100 Thieves in New York. And he took a look at the hard point and the pushes they were making and how uh, ingenious some of their holds were and some of their pushes were. Like, for example, the P4 on straight, instead of wrapping to mid from P2, they would wrap all the way around the spawn. And as a result, we're able to break it. But there are certain key moments in those games where you can see the inexperience by these players. You can see Clay having to, like in comms, having to tell Mac, hey, go back up top, like make sure we don't flip spawns, or certain breakdowns where on P3 of Moscow, you had Kenny and Slasher having this little crossfire, watching outside mid/gold, and New York, they don't play it correctly, and all three players pushing through mid end up getting picked, and their push is done for, and they end up losing on the next hill. So it's like moments like that where a veteran team, a team with leadership, or not necessarily leadership, but a veteran team that understands the situation, maybe would be able to effectively trade. Whereas New York in that situation, they have a lot of unexperienced players and players that aren't used to the role that they're in. They don't win, and Clay can only do so much. So there was that in the hard point. I mean, looking back at the S&D, I mean, they played really well in the S&D as well. Again, looking at the stats from the S&D, Clay had a 1.22, Diamond Kong had a close 1v2. I mean, there's just certain rounds where,
That
um,
clutch was so nice.
yeah, the clutch was really nice. I mean, Kenny had a 1v3. If Kenny doesn't get the
Yeah.
1v3, they end up winning it. I mean, it was around 11, right?
Yep.
So again, key moments, and then the control. Again, it was a lot of strong team play out of both teams, but ended up winning it for the Thieves on the last round. And looking back, even at the stats from the control, Asim was doing very well, Khan was doing very well, Clayster was doing very well. And the player that people are going to call out on, and rightfully so, is Mac. Mac did not have a great series. He had a .63. He had a .77 in the hard point, with 5 and 10 in the S&D, and a .57 in the control. He just did not hold up to the sub pressure of Kenny and TJ, or Temp and TJ rather, sorry. And that is what ended up really hurting them in key moments. And it's going to be a bigger conversation if this is the new norm for Mac, because we all know Hydra's coming over from North America. It's going to happen eventually. We're not sure as of when, but when it does happen, the question of who's going to be dropped is going to get a bit more interesting, because everyone assumed it'd be Asim, but with the way he's been playing, maybe it's going to be Mac. And I think this is something that's going to be a conversation later down. But for New York fans, I know people will say, "Oh, New York didn't play that great." I mean, they could have won every map. I think give them more time and they'll improve. It's still early days, so I wouldn't be too concerned.
Yeah, and also for New York next weekend, you have some good options. You got opportunities to win some series. Yeah, you got London as your first matchup, and London just lost to Seattle, so that's not great. So I think in New York, you're looking forward to that matchup, and then after that, you play Minnesota, who obviously did look great, but there's definitely room for upsets in those hard points, and if you can steal S&D, it's weird saying that. It's weird saying if you can steal S&D, but if New York can steal S&D against Minnesota, you can definitely go 2-0 next weekend. It wouldn't be that big of a surprise at all. But you're right. Matt didn't play well enough, and like you talked about Hydra coming back over, and I'm ready for it. And you can tell it's kind of what the team needs. They kind of need just like a really good Slayer who can just consistently drop bombs on people, and that's what Hydra can do. So definitely excited to see that coming in the future. But that takes us to our last team that we want to talk about, which is the Florida Mutineers. So again, only played one series, lost to Toronto. so there's not like a ton to dissect there. But I just wanted to say a couple things about them, mostly stemming around Awakening and Slacked, and it's just like for Awakening for me, obviously last year, unbelievable talent, and his centering was incredible. His pre-firing IQ kind of thing is incredible. He just kind of always knew the reads and knew where people were going to be on the map and had a fantastic year. And it's a bit of a weird team though. I think even without watching against Toronto, if you just look at the roster, it's a little bit weird. I talked about it last week. I said like I kind of want to see Slack step up in a leadership role and like leading comps and stuff like that and kind of lead this young team because outside of Slack, it is very young. This guy's made his rise up recently. Awakening was last year. Neptune, this is his first year competing. It's good to take them a bit of time. I do think they're very talented, and I do expect them to be at competing at the top level and potentially winning some majors and whatnot. But I do think it'll take some time, so I wouldn't get too concerned if I was a Florida fan or in like Florida management too soon because like I think they got very I don't want to say like lucky because it wasn't, but the pickups they made last year and how fast they turned things around happened really quickly. And I don't think you can kind of rely on it happening again, because you had like Pharaoh come in, you had Awakening come in, obviously for Pharaoh, and they instantly turned that team around and made them like a contender, like quickly, and they started winning like 3 in a row, right? Like that kind of success after making a change is not that common to happen. So like I don't think picking up Neptune, I don't think you really should expect that kind of success straight away. But again, like it's a very talented team. It's going to take some time, but I do think they'll figure things out and be like, top team in the game. And looking ahead into next week, they play the Gorillas and they play Paris. So for me, it's an expected 2-0. They should win both of those games, both of those series, sorry. And for me, I'm really looking towards Slack to be the leader, and then also Skies to hit the form he hit last year. I kind of put
he did not have a good series, guys.
he did not have a good series, yeah. And I kind of put like Neptune and Awakening in a boat of like extreme talent, so they're fine. Like I'm not too concerned about them. But for Skies, like he was the top AR last year. Like he has to hit that top form again. And you can excuse like Neptune and Awakening for being young or whatever, but like Skies has to play that well. And in an AR matchup against Assault, it's not going to be easy, but I want to see him do it. And then against Paris, Yuli didn't have the best weekend either, so I think Skies should be able to win that matchup too. So I think Florida is definitely a team to watch out for next weekend because I don't think this Toronto showing is their full potential, and I do think they can definitely improve.
I think with regards to the map vetoes, also I think we should take into consideration the 2 maps they played were Crossroads and Garrison, 2 SMG dominated maps. So
why would they do that? Okay, all right,
it is a bit concerning if that was. I mean, Garrison, to be fair, if I'm not mistaken, was the map they played FaZe very well on.
Well, the Garrison that played against Toronto, they just couldn't, like, Slack just couldn't keep up with, and Neptune as well. They couldn't keep up with KME and Kleenex. It's not really like, it's not really this guy's fault if your sub pressure is just not non-existent.
Yeah, true.
But you're right. You're right, though. Definitely have to figure out map vetoes. I think that's one thing we're gonna have to wait on.
We'll need to see a bit more of a sample size before we can start to look at each team's and map vetoes. Not to mention, we expect Express to be in the rotation sooner rather than later, so that'll change everything as well, right? So,
that'll mess up a lot of S&D as well.
Yeah, and plus, are we gonna get snipers and smokes back? Who knows? So that changes a lot of things. But unless you have anything else to mention, should we move on to the AM scene?
Yeah. So we can wrap up with the AM scene here and just kind of give our thoughts on the recent Cup performances. Obviously, in North America, we saw New York Subliners win. Unfortunately, I didn't get to catch much of the action because we were watching CDL action, so it's hard, keep count of everything. But whatever. But New York wins, and it's just setting up the matchup against Wester. Like that's all I really want to say about NA. Just like I'm just excited to see that matchup. This could be fun. Wester lost to Anthrax and Co, but as much as credit I want to give them, and they are playing well, and that's the second time in a row that they played well, like second week in a row. So good on them. At the same time, though, I feel like Wester definitely take more care and practice in the Elite Series, so maybe they put their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. But either way, them versus New York is a matchup we all want to see. But yeah, so what about the other regions?
Yeah, so with regards to EU, the Rams won back-to-back, as similar to New York in their case. And again, I think Rams are starting to solidify themselves as, putting their bid for the top team in the EU. I know we sort of mentioned how in the EU, it's sort of hard to uh, make sense or pick a top team considering how it looks like in most cases most teams can beat anyone on a given day. But the Rams have shown some consistency as of late, and I really think that all stemmed from their switch to have Lucky as a flex and move Metals to that sub role. I think that has really helped them, and we mentioned that in the past. And um, although people will talk about Nvidia, and even though he's never going to drop stats, they clearly play fundamentally very strong and well in both Hardpoint and S&D. They've always been a very strong S&D team, so it's working out for them. Another thing to mention, Orglis plays second. They look to be very strong with their new lineup with Harry, which is something interesting. I'm going to look forward to watching them more because I'm really curious to see how they progress. I didn't get to watch a lot of them in the first week, so they're going to be a team to keep an eye on. House Tarth finished third. Nothing much to see there. Obviously, a top team. They dropped map 5 to the Rams and then lose to Orglis later on. So tough go for them. Obtained. A little interesting note about them is that it looks like they've switched uh, in terms of game modes. And what I mean by that is Obtained was known as the top respawn or hardpoint team. And their S&D lacked. It looks like that is flipped now with Chain on the team. Their hardpoint's been lacking. Their S&Ds have picked up though. They did lose map 5, but that is something interesting to note that the hard point is the one that needs to be fixed. But a team like that, I expect it to. Singularity again, top 6. I mean, it's sort of a running theme with them. They're really going to need to pick it up if they want to contend for that top 6 or top 2 for even the buy for the Elite Series. So that'll be interesting to note. But one thing I want to talk about is we're going to talk about the APAC scene for once. And although we had a familiar face win, which is the Renegades, I took a little bit of a look at their matches and even stats from the previous Cup 4 and 5 because I was curious to talk about a player in particular, which I've been talking with his manager a little bit. Both of us have been, and want to talk about Pred. Obviously, some people may know him from the amateur scene as this really aggressive sub player that played in APAC last season. Breaking Point, I had him, I think, within their top 5 in terms of amateur players. There were rumors that we heard about, CDL teams looking at him, but he's over here in APAC, and I want to look at how exactly he's performing. And holy crap, is he good? Not only in terms of KD, I mean, his stats, he had a 1.1. The rest of his team was negative. Not a single person on his team for the past 2 cups had a positive KD in those 2 cups combined. Luke at 0.98, Fight at 0.92, Shocks 0.92, Pred 1.1. In terms of engagements, he has over almost 100 more engagements than the second most on his team in 2 cups. He's averaging over 20 more engagements per series than his teammates. That just shows you how much pressure he's putting on the map, how aggressive he's being. And of that 20 engagements, he's winning like 15 of them. So he's extremely successful entry. We've talked about him being sort of similar to a BZ in that way. And although Renegades, for some whatever reason, they don't seem to play the game very well, but because they're so talented, they win anyways. They keep going down to losers and winning 2 best of 5s. I swear they've done it like 2 or 3 times now, which has got to be disheartening for the APAC region. But um, Renegades just keep on winning. I just wanted to highlight Pred and his incredible prowess. But yeah, with regards to the Elite Series, obviously, this week's going to be very telling as we start to wrap up and close towards the major. Which teams are going to make it and which teams don't. Uh, you know, um, it, it'll be very interesting. I think we get Wester versus Subliners, so that's going to be a
Yep.
great matchup. It's going to be interesting to see if EU stays the way it is. Is Orgo's going to stay on top, or the Gangsters going to move up? How's that going to shake down? So a lot of Call of Duty to watch over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said to start the podcast, it's a very exciting time to be a COD fan. Even if you're
Yeah,
just a fan of the CDL or a fan of the Challenger scene, whatever kind of COD you watch, it's out there and there's tons of content surrounding it. It's
yep,
it's awesome. We love it, and for all the headaches that online and host wars and everything gives us, we're still getting good content. We're still getting good
yeah.
gameplay. So it's awesome. It's gonna be a fun year, and yeah, I think just to wrap up the episode, we're gonna try to probably do a preview one for next week, or if we don't have time, we'll just do a reaction one as well.
Yeah,
But it's gonna move very fast now, like the rest of this year, right? So you're gonna have like elite series after elite series, weekend after weekend. It's gonna be fast moving. So we're gonna try to pump out as much as we can do on our part. And if you have any kind of specific player or team or anybody you want to take a look at and kind of dive in further on, let us know. If there's a
yeah.
player you
If you
want us to look at, let us know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you made it this far in the podcast, like let us know if someone you want to look out for. Predator was a guy that I really want to look at in particular. Just considering that we don't get to watch a lot of him in the APAC region, but if there's another player, whether it be APAC, EU, NA, that you think we should keep our eyes on or should highlight, let us know for sure, because I'd love to do that.
Yep. And so that with that, that's gonna end the podcast. We'll put all the stuff in the description below for, Breaking Point, Coggapedia, all that kind of good stuff. And also check out our Twitter. We have all the clips and fun stuff happening over there. So with that, thank you guys for watching and see you next time.
See you.